Chapter 24, Waters of Reflection. The journey continued under the vast cloud-dappled sky, with each day growing more exhausting as the group pushed forward. The monsters that seemed to stalk them, shadowy creatures of the dark woods, attacked them more frequently. But with each skirmish, they became more skilled, more in tune with each other's movements. Elowen had learned to channel her magic in bursts of controlled power, while Celine and Lyra worked in seamless coordination, defending their party from the onslaught of beasts that would have easily overwhelmed them a week ago. Still, the toll was undeniable. The bruises from combat, the exhaustion from the constant travel, and the wariness of the road all weighed heavily on the group. Even Sir Aldrich, a man used to long marches and constant vigilance, seemed to grow quieter, more reflective as the days dragged on. Finally, after several days of travel, they reached a quiet spot, a clearing with a crystalline river that sparkled in the sunlight. The waters were so clear that it felt like they were looking at a mirror, the rippling current reflecting the trees and the sky above in perfect clarity. The air around it smelled fresh, almost ethereal, and the scene seemed to promise peace, even if it was just for a moment. "Finally," Lyra said, brushing a few strands of hair behind her pointed ears. She surveyed the area with a small smile. "It's beautiful." Elowen sighed, her shoulders relaxing as she stepped toward the water's edge, dipping her fingers into the cool, inviting current. "This place feels like a dream." "We'll need to rest here for the night," Sir Aldrich grunted from where he stood near the horses. "I'll look after the mounts. You ladies, go on. It's about time you take a break." Celine gave him a nod of thanks, but before she could speak, Lyra had already set about her work. With a quiet chant, the elf summoned a bit of magic, and a portion of the river near their campsite began to shift. The water parted, creating a natural basin, which quickly filled with warm water, a heated pool perfect for relaxing. The river's crystal-clear waters flowed around it, adding to the serenity of the scene. "Perfect," Lyra said, her sharp eyes sparkling as she admired her handiwork. "Now we can bathe without the cold." Elowen smiled at the elf's resourcefulness, feeling the warmth of the water's pull. It had been a long time since she'd had a chance to simply relax. She removed her travelling clothes, feeling the weight of the journey slowly lift from her body as she stepped into the warm pool. Celine followed her with a similar sense of relief, the tension of their journey starting to melt away in the warmth of the water. As they soaked, the silence of the forest around them felt comforting. The only sound was the gentle gurgling of the river and the soft rustling of leaves as a breeze blew through the trees. "So," Celine began after a long stretch of quiet. She tilted her head toward Lyra, her voice casual but with an undercurrent of curiosity. "What's it like being an elf?" Lyra laughed softly. The sound light and musical. "What's it like being human, I wonder?" The two shared a knowing glance before Celine continued. I mean, the way you live, it seems so much more peaceful, different, I guess." Elowen found herself leaning back in the pool, her arms resting on the edge as she listened. The soft tension in the air faded as the conversation turned lighter. There was something liberating about being away from the political pressures and the demands of her royal title. Lyra shrugged slightly, her gaze distant for a moment as she considered Celine's words. "We don't have the same constraints you do, if that's what you mean. Elves, we are often more free to explore life at our own pace. We don't carry the same weight of responsibility that humans do, at least not in the same way." Elowen blinked, the thought striking her. "How do you mean?" "Well, for one thing," Lyra continued, "elves don't bind themselves to the same traditions and structures you do. Love, for example, it's something we explore in many ways, and with many people, often when we are young. Our culture teaches us to learn from experience, to understand different facets of love before we settle down with one person." She paused, her sharp eyes observing both women. "Not that we all choose to marry, but it's a part of who we are. We express affection and bond differently. We don't see the idea of love as something confined to a single individual or a set of rules. It's free." Celine seemed to ponder the words. "I've always thought of it as something exclusive, a bond between two people, you know." She glanced over at Elowen. "That's how I was raised. I've always thought love was about that kind of closeness." Elowen was quiet for a moment, taking in Lyra's words. She couldn't help but think back to her own feelings about Alistair. They had shared something deep, something that made her feel connected to him in ways she hadn't fully understood before. Her feelings for him were exclusive, she thought. She had always been told love meant only one person forever. But hearing Lyra's perspective, she wondered what it would mean to explore those feelings in a different way. Did love always have to be just one? Or could it mean something broader, something beyond the confines of duty and expectation? I don't think I understand completely, Elowen admitted, her voice thoughtful. But I think I'm starting to. There's a lot more to it than I was taught. Celine smiled softly, her gaze lingering on her friend. Maybe that's the beauty of it, she said. It's something that grows, evolves. Lyra's eyes twinkled with amusement as she watched the two of them, clearly enjoying the quiet, personal moment between them. And it's always interesting to see what forms it will take in each of you. The conversation stretched into the night as they soaked in the warm waters, sharing their stories and their lives. Celine began to talk about her early years in the palace and the trials of growing up under the watchful eyes of nobles and advisors. Elowen shared her dreams, her goals to protect her kingdom, but also the weight that came with her responsibilities. It was rare for them to speak so openly, and the words came easily now, relieved from the strain of politics and royal obligations. In turn, Lyra opened up about her travels, about the wide world outside of the kingdom, the various peoples she had encountered. She described the freedom that came with being an elf and her love for the open road. Unlike the other two, she seemed to have no reservations when it came to speaking about herself. She was unafraid to express her thoughts and emotions, something Elowen and Celine admired. As the night deepened, they finally relaxed into silence, their earlier discussions settling into a gentle calm. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and for a few brief hours the world outside seemed far away, leaving them with nothing but each other and their shared moments of understanding. In this small piece of peace, they were no longer just the princess and her companions. They were women, allies and friends, sharing in the beauty of their world and the complexities of their own hearts. Chapter 24, Continuation. The warmth of the hot spring had done more than soothe their aching bodies. It had broken down barriers. Since that night, Lyra had become even closer to Elowen and Celine, her usual sharp wit now accompanied by genuine warmth and playful teasing. Their journey continued, the road still treacherous, yet the atmosphere among them had lightened. Lyra no longer kept a cautious distance, but instead eagerly engaged in banter, her elven charm and mischievous nature, making her a welcome distraction from the hardships of travel. One afternoon, as they rested by a fallen tree, Celine and Lyra sat close together, sharing an inside joke that had Celine giggling, something so rare that it caught Elowen by surprise. "Oh no, I recognise that look," Elowen muttered, eyeing the two conspirators. Lyra leaned toward her, smirking. "What look? The one that says you're plotting something." Celine gave an innocent shrug. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Elowen, do you always assume the worst of me?" Lyra sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her chest. "I am a lady of dignity and grace." Celine snorted, and Elowen rolled her eyes. "Dignity? You tripped over a root just yesterday." Lyra grinned. "And I did it beautifully." Sir Aldrich, who had been securing the horses, let out a small chuckle, shaking his head as he watched them. "You three are starting to sound like sisters." "Or lovers," Lyra added smoothly, earning a small choke from Elowen, who immediately looked away, pretending to be focused on adjusting her saddle straps. Celine, to Elowen's horror, didn't deny it. Instead, she just smirked and shared a knowing look with Lyra, as if they had their own secret conversation. That night, as they made camp beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak, Elowen couldn't help but notice how Celine and Lyra moved together with an unspoken ease. They whispered in hushed tones, their laughter like the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, when Elowen had assumed everyone was settling for the night, she noticed Celine and Lyra slipping away into the woods, their footsteps light, their forms vanishing into the darkness. A strange, unfamiliar worry settled in her stomach. Was something wrong? Were they meeting someone? Had they sensed danger? Unable to ignore her instincts, Elowen quietly followed. The deeper she went into the woods, the more she regretted her decision. She moved carefully, her steps muffled by the soft undergrowth, until she caught a glimpse of them in a small clearing bathed in moonlight. And then her heart stopped. The sight before her was not what she had expected. Lyra and Celine were kissing. It wasn't just a simple peck, but something deeper, something gentle yet intense, the kind of connection that spoke of understanding, trust and hidden affections nurtured over time. The way Lyra's hands rested on Celine's waist, the way Celine leaned into her touch, it was an intimacy that Elowen had never quite understood until that moment. Her face burned and she quickly turned away, heart racing. Oh gods, oh gods, oh gods. She moved as quietly as possible, hurrying back to camp, trying to erase what she had seen from her mind. But sleep did not come easily that night. A new dynamic. The next morning, Elowen struggled to meet their eyes. She wasn't upset. Far from it. She had no claim over Celine or Lyra's choices, and yet something about it unnerved her. Maybe it was the realization that she knew so little about love. Maybe it was the way they carried on as if nothing had changed, while she was stuck feeling shy, embarrassed, confused. Unfortunately, Sir Aldrich was far too perceptive. As they rode through the thickening trees, he leaned toward her, a smirk playing on his lips. "You've been quiet," he remarked. Elowen, still flustered, kept her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Just thinking." "About our destination?" he asked, though the amusement in his voice made it clear he knew the real reason. She narrowed her eyes at him. "Yes, obviously." Sir Aldrich chuckled, his deep voice rich with humour. "Right, not about our dear companions sneaking off into the woods last night?" Elowen nearly choked on air. Her reaction was all the confirmation he needed. He let out a full laugh, shaking his head. "Ah, Princess, I do enjoy seeing you caught off guard." "I wasn't caught off guard," she said defensively. "I was merely curious," he teased. She shot him a glare, cheeks burning. "I hate you." "No, you don't," she groaned, tugging on her horse's reins in frustration. This was going to be a long ride. The sacred grove approaches. By midday, the trees around them began to shift. The further they travelled, the denser and wilder the woods became, as if they were entering a realm untouched by civilization. The air carried a strange energy, thick with magic, making the hairs on Elowen's arms rise. Finally, they saw them. A group of elves emerging from between the trees, their green and gold robes shimmering in the filtered sunlight. Their leader, a tall elven man with braided silver hair and piercing green eyes, stepped forward. His gaze swept over them, pausing briefly on Lyra before settling on Elowen. "You stand at the entrance to the sacred grove," he spoke, his voice smooth yet commanding. "Who seeks passage?" Elowen straightened in her saddle, trying to mask the lingering awkwardness from earlier. "I am Princess Elowen of Elysium. We seek an audience with the Archfey." The elf studied her for a moment, then glanced toward Lyra. A knowing smile tugged at his lips, as if recognizing an old acquaintance. "The Archfey awaits you," he said, stepping aside. "But be warned, the sacred grove does not welcome all. Tread carefully, Princess, for the forest itself will weigh your heart." With that, the elves turned, silently guiding them deeper into the ever-growing woods. Elowen took a deep breath, her mind shifting from her personal turmoil to the journey ahead. The seer was close, and with him the answers she had been seeking.